Welcome into the Dawg Dispatch. I am John Smith, your host, here with my good buddy Coach Hayes. It is Wednesday, September the 18th. Georgia has a bye week this week. Coming off of, Coach, I know you've done the breakdowns, the film reviews, the film study. Coming off an ugly game, man. What an ugly game for Georgia. And so we're going to talk about it tonight. We're going to talk a little bit. Coach has broken down the game from both the offensive and defensive side of the ball on his YouTube channel at Coach Hayes Huddle, at Coach Hayes HUDL. So you can check all of that out. You can follow him on Twitter, all that stuff. We're going to do two things tonight. One, just get some, candid thoughts. We're not going to go too deep in terms of breaking down the game with Kentucky because, like I said, Coach has already done that on his channel. Would love for y'all to go check out his channel. But then we're going to spend the majority of our time tonight doing something a little different. We're going to do Ask the Dawg Dispatch. We put out a call for questions. A lot of you submitted your questions to us on Twitter. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat as well tonight if you're watching this live on YouTube. And we're just going to go through and answer some of the questions. Coach, there's a lot of questions for this team,
Yes,
both looking ahead to Alabama, looking back to Kentucky. So we'll just spend some time tonight answering those. And y'all will be the ones that are fueling the content. So really appreciate you being along. Coach, how are we feeling tonight? Now that we've had a few days to digest the game, a few days to look at film, all those things, how are you feeling?
Well, it's really, first off, it's good to be back on the mic with you, John. One of the things that I look into when you're watching film, it's just like back in the day of coaching. A couple of days of being in the film room is sobering. And that's what's important because when you're in the film room, film doesn't lie. You have the ability to go in, you fix mistakes and you're able to move on from it. But it's that whole mental hurdle that you got to get over too. And in this case scenario, it's a nice hurdle because it's a win. It's an ugly win, but it's a win. So, I know that there's probably a lot of gnashing of teeth going on this week as they begin this week in the bye week of practice and a lot of things to fix. But the beauty of it is that you're still fixing all of these things with the aftermath of not being number one for this week, which honestly I could care less about. So, it's just a lot of things to polish and fix up. And I think we're going to see those things happen as the week progresses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is, coming off of a game like Georgia had versus Kentucky, I think things could not set up better with having a bye week and then also having a really, good quality caliber of an opponent waiting on you in 2 weeks. So those two things coming together. The third thing I think that couldn't have gone better for Georgia is that now they're no longer ranked number one. And I know a lot of fans, put a lot of stock into that. A lot of fans I had our buddy Craig on Twitter who was like, "Don't give up the crown." I was like, "I don't know what crown you're talking about. Georgia doesn't have a crown right now."
Nope.
But he was, he didn't want to give up that number one spot. And for me, I think that's a good motivator. Kirby Smart, we know he's going to use anything he possibly can to motivate this football team. And now he has 2 weeks. He has 2 weeks to work with it to try to get things right. So, Coach, let's hop into the questions that we've gotten from our followers, from our listeners. I'm going to start here with, let's see, where are we going to go? Let's go to
there's good ones out there, man.
There's some real good ones. All right, so we're going to do this. We're going to talk about the offense first. So R.Rue Tigger, at R.Rue Tigger on Twitter, asked this question. Is it feasible for the offense to make a significant leap in Tuscaloosa, addressing the issues Coach highlighted on film, offensive line, QB, looking downfield more. So our Rue Tigger, obviously had watched some of your film breakdowns, Coach. Do you think it's feasible for this team to make a significant leap in Tuscaloosa?
I think it's something they need to take personal individually as their own abilities first before they even look about what they're going to do against Alabama. Because realistically, I think all the things that we're talking about are fundamental technique that they need to fix. It's not about just going out and being able to block somebody, tackle somebody. It's about the execution of the individual athlete, kick sliding correctly to take on a defensive end that's rushing hard off the edge, being able to step with the right foot when it's right zone or left zone, knowing your responsibility when you got to fill a gap on gap scheme from the defensive side of the ball. So everything that we're talking about that we're frustrated on fundamentally, I think gets fixed just by completing practices daily, staying in the film room, understanding what your responsibilities are, I think those things get fixed. The mental hurdle of getting ready for Alabama is the next part to it. That's the thing that everybody's wanting to see, because we wanted to see this highlighted game against Kentucky prior to going into Alabama. But honestly, I like the humility of what's happened this past week. I think that's what's going to help drive us to get better. And all those mantras that they say of eating off the floor, and the Bloody Tuesday practice that they had yesterday. I'm looking at all those things that they're looking at. Do they really believe in those mantras? Are they really standing by what they say? And leadership, leadership takes place in these kind of categories, because when everybody's having fun, when things are going right, when everybody's winning, everybody's winning by 4 or 5 touchdowns every week, we're scoring 40 plus a game, everybody's happy. But the minute you have some adversity, that's where character kicks in. And that's the same principle when you're looking at it from a coach's perspective, from a athlete's perspective. When you get hit and punched in the mouth, what are you going to do? And I think that's kind of in a sense, and we're saying all this in spite of the fact that we won the ball game. It's almost like we're talking like we lost. So, I think based off answering his question, there is no doubt we're going to see a difference of this coming week, obviously for practice and our prep and our mental capacity of what we've got to do to go out there and beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So my question is a resounding yes. We're going to see a different football team show up against Alabama in Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Coach, listen, I'm going to go back. You don't have to look forward. I'm going to go back to the second half of the Clemson game. I mean, we've seen this offense. We've seen what this offense can do in a game against a talented defensive opponent, a physical defense, a defense that's good up front. We saw that in the second half of the Clemson game. We saw, and again, it was Tennessee Tech, so we're not going to hang our hats on any of that. But we saw what Georgia did against Tennessee Tech. But I mean, that Clemson game, Georgia 447 yards of total offense, 278 yards passing, 169 yards rushing, 6.3 yards per carry, 8.4 yards per pass. I mean, controlled the ball 32 minutes of the game. I think the challenge that Georgia had in the Clemson game that they continued to have this week versus Kentucky is in the Clemson game, they were 4 of 11 for on third down, and then at Kentucky they were 5 of 13. So it's a third down. Right now it seems to be it's not as simplistic as a third down problem, but it is a third down problem. Like the challenge Georgia's having right now is they can't stay on the field. They can't convert third downs at a clip that they were converting third downs, say like the last couple years, right? And so,
right.
But when you look at it's a great question. Is it feasible for the offense to make a significant leap? But what I will say is, like, you can go back and look at the second half of the Clemson game. It's there. It's just a matter of executing. It's not necessarily about does this offense have to make a big leap. This offense just has to find themselves again and execute again, and you have 2 weeks to figure that out.
I think you've got two staples you fit. On defense, really, it's just solidifying, just better tackling in the open field. We missed a lot of tackles defensively. Yeah. And on the offensive side of the ball, Carson Beck's got to trust his pocket and start pushing the ball vertically down the field and trusting those windows of throwing opportunities that he's going to get as they move forward. So I think those two things, really fit well from the defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball. Yep. We're going to see a difference, no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look, I'll give you just one more example. Georgia right now is 76th in the country in third down conversion percentage at 39.4%. Last year, just to put that in perspective, Georgia was first in the country in third down conversion percentage at 55%. In 2022, to put it in perspective, Georgia was fifth in the country in third down conversion at 51%. So, to me, it is, you mentioned it's tackling on defense. A lot of stuff goes into helping your offense be more successful. But at the end of the day, I think, clean up some of that third down. Maybe there's a little bit of, clearly you've broken it down on film, but obviously offensive line challenges, a number of different challenges, but it seems to be manifesting itself in that third down area.
I agree.
And so, yeah, I mean, clean that up and it'll be shocking how different this offense will look in 2 weeks.
Thanks for the question there, buddy.
Yeah, okay. Great question. All right, Coach, got a couple of other questions that we're going to get to. Let's talk about, we'll look back to Kentucky for this one. Why didn't we incorporate Humphreys more last Saturday versus Kentucky using mesh routes or drag routes? This is from TJ Witten on Twitter. Coach, what's your? We clearly we're not on staff. We're not in the room. We don't know definitively why Georgia didn't incorporate him more. But why would you say? What would be your hypothesis as to why Georgia didn't incorporate Humphreys more on those types of plays?
It's tough when you've got a set three that you like when you're in there in 11, 10 personnel. So, Arian and Dylan and obviously Dominic have created that 3-man rotation. And then, of course, I think Humphreys is one of those that's rotating in with a second group. So he was actually out there on the very first play from scrimmage, though, where, we ran the very first play we ran. He was actually at Z on that actual play. But I think it's just because of the lack of opportunities for execution on offense. We didn't have a lot of series on offense, if you think about it. So when you're trying to get somebody into a rhythm, like your quarterback to your receivers, putting the ball in your playmaker's hands, and you're only getting, 2, 3 and outs, and then you extend one drive that goes, 5 or 6 plays, there's no rhythm built. There's no capacity of plays built into that. So, I mean, you're running probably 12 plays and you're done with the first quarter. All of a sudden you're saying, well, why don't you do this with another player? Well, heck, the other 3 playmakers haven't touched the ball yet either. So, or have touched it maybe once between them. So I think it's just the lack of rhythm from your primary ones to not look at it. And then typically when you see somebody like, say, an Anthony Evans, if he ever gets in at slot, or a London Humphreys, Colby Young, all of those guys, it'll just be a situation where it's a rotation in. And it just happens to be he the one that comes open in the window. But I just think it's because of the lack of series that we had on offense, and that's what created the juxtaposition of why you don't see somebody like a London Humphreys or any of the other guys that are rotating in as 2s at receiver.
Yep. It makes a lot of sense. I think that's probably pretty spot on. All right, Coach. Let's talk about. Let's go back maybe. Look back one more time.
Thanks for your question, though, by the way, TJ. Appreciate it.
Thanks, TJ. TJ's got a couple more, so we'll save our thanks for TJ once we get through.
Okay.
Get through all of this. No, well, you're good. You're good. Thanks, TJ. We'll say thank you multiple times. All right. Let's see. So let's look ahead to Alabama, but also look back. Okay. We know what happened in the SEC championship game in December 2023 when Georgia really kind of ran a little bit of a spy kind of situation, and didn't really, either they didn't try to pressure Milroe as much, or they didn't get home when they did try to pressure. C Rainey 19 on Twitter asks, which strategy will we pick this time against Milroe? Will we go no pressure, or will we get after that ass? I know which I would pick. Coach, so let's talk about which strategy we think Georgia will pick, and then if that's different from what you would pick, then we can talk about that. But talk a little bit about that.
My buddy, Coach Rainey, my quarterback's coach at North Murray, good friend. Cody Rainey, his dad, Roger Rayner, the athletic director at North Murray. He's now retired. He actually left right after I did. But anyhow, good old Coach Rainey. I know that I would love to say, and I know what you're thinking too, Cody. I want to get after that ass. I want to be able to get after them in multiple packages, especially from our rabbit package, because I think we have finally found the ability with Jalen Walker to be able to play the inside linebacker and allow your 2 rabbits on the outside and Gabe Harris and Damon Wilson. And we start bringing 4 and 5 man pressure and get after that ass with those different X stunts and bringing stuff off the edge and making him have he's not going to have time to throw 2.5 second window. Let's not sit back and let him, because that was the thing, we had the ability to spy him all day long, but he had 8 seconds to throw the football, and DBs can't cover. I mean, it's just like with a quarterback. You want about a 4-second window, and after that, it's fair game, DB to wide receiver ratio. So, I want to get after that rear end so that he has the ability to make him flush him out of the pocket, make him use his legs, which is obviously a strength of his, but have the ability to maintain gap integrity when you do that rush. And that's the one thing, if Georgia does pretty well, they only have one screw up this past Saturday against Kentucky, where they ran an X stunt that Shamlis was not able to get back across to get into his gap. So that's the one thing that's very nice about what they do when they're fast and they are able to get through, because now Gabe and Damon and Jalen both, man, they're lining up as 3 techniques at times and lining up
Hmm.
as 5 techniques and beating offensive guards and beating offensive tackles. That's so good to see. And when you can do that and you have the speed that these guys have, now you've
Hmm.
got 3 guys that are fast at or faster than Jalen chasing him down and making him not be able to have any type of time to throw the football. So that's what I want to see him do. And I think that's what Coach Rainey would probably say too if I had my guesses about it.
Yeah, I think so too. Listen, you got to get after Jalen Milroe. You got to get after
Mm-hmm.
him. And here's the situation. I've said this since the game happened in December of last year, and I'll keep saying it. The main reason that Georgia did not run a lot of exotic blitz packages against Jalen Milroe was not because they were scared of his legs. It wasn't because they were nervous about how he eventually even ended up hurting them anyway. They didn't do it because they had 2 true freshmen on the field at linebacker for the majority of the game.
Yes.
And when that happens, I mean, this coach better than anybody. I know, Coach Rainey you're talking about probably knows it too. It's like when you have young kids on the field, it doesn't matter if they've played in 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 games for you that year. When you're in an SEC championship game against the team with the caliber and players of Alabama and the athletic ability of a quarterback like Jalen Milroe, you make different decisions than you would make if you had guys that had a year of experience, that had 2 off
Right.
seasons under their belt, that know, have run those stunts in practice over and over and over.
Yep.
And so for me, I think it came down to there just wasn't enough cohesiveness. And Georgia, when they tried to pressure, there were times where it just literally, we've talked about this on the show before. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
those true freshman guys were hitting wrong gaps, and like that's
Right.
and to Glenn Schumann, to Kirby Smart. I think that's probably more it was in the game because of how close the game was and whatever. Probably felt more risky than than
Yeah.
running those and they're not being executed well than
Yeah.
just spying and sitting back. Now you have 2 weeks to prepare. You've got a linebacking core that does include some young guys still, but you got some guys now who have experience under their belt. And more importantly, you mentioned it, Coach. You mentioned it. More importantly, Kirby Smart has said this year with Jalen Walker, the coaches took a hard look in the mirror and said to themselves, we have to find a way to use this guy in a way that utilizes his skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Kirby Smart said, Jalen Walker was really it was really on us because we were trying to mold him into the position and the role that we kind of have always kind of tried to mold guys with his size, speed, criteria,
Right.
ability into, and he's not that kind of guy. And so in this offseason, it was clear they took a step back and said, we're gonna use this kid to the best of his ability. And when they did that, you see what's happening on the field. And so you throw in, that move with Jalen Walker plus the experience of the linebackers, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Jordan's definitely going to get after Jalen Milroe. And then on
Mm-hmm.
top of it, I mean, please, dear God, please give me. I'm begging, and I don't beg for things, but please give me that Formby kid from Alabama on either. I don't care what position he's playing on the offensive line. Please put him on
Yep.
the offensive line because
Yes.
South Florida made that kid look silly,
Yes,
and
they did.
and I know Alabama's still trying to get their offensive line healthy, but man, you get this, you get that kid lined up there, and you get C.J. Allen or Smile Munden or even Jalen Walker coming on exchange stunt, into that
Mm-hmm.
tackle or guard position. It's gonna be a tough day for that kid.
Hey, side note too, that if he does
Mm-hmm.
get the chance to throw the ball up, we are going to finally get to see a little bit of one-on-ones on the outside with Humphreys
Mm-hmm.
and Dalen more too. So that's something I'm interested to see
Yeah.
because we haven't been pressed very hard for a lot of one-on-one 50-50 balls yet. So
Mm-hmm.
if he does get a chance to throw it up like he's been used to doing these past 3 weeks, I'll be
Mm-hmm.
interested to see how well we do back it up in the defensive backfield too, because we're going to have some good play from our DBs as well.
Yeah, agree. All right, Coach. Let's. We got a few more that we're going to get to. If you're watching live on YouTube and you have questions, just throw them in the chat. We'll be happy to get to some of those too.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and answer Coach Rainey's other question. How many touches will Nate Frazier have? What
Good question.
do we have? Yeah, do we have any any prognostication on the touches that Nate Frazier is going to have?
I think you're going to see the same similarity you saw to Kentucky. I think Trevor
Mhm.
Etienne is obviously going to get the majority of the totes. I think you're going to see, as long as Branson's staying healthy, he's going to be probably the next rotator now, because Nate Frazier, as much as we have high praise for him and what we want to see him do, he was very freshman like against Kentucky. And that's okay, because now he's got stuff on film. He can get better from that. He can learn and improve his skill back there, because it's just going to make him better by having the reps in an actual live game. So I think honestly he'll be probably around, if he's lucky, about the same that he had Kentucky. I'm going to say around the 5 to 7 area he's going to spot, but you'll probably see Branson's number maybe increase a little bit. I just hope that with Trevor Etienne's situation, I think he had a little banged up shoulder, but after what he showed coming back in the second half, he didn't look like there was any setback to what was going on. Probably got a nice little shot in the shoulder, and
Mhm.
hopefully he's still doing well with that. So you're going to see Etienne carry the majority of the load. Branson's going to be the nice the 1-2 punch, and Branson needs this too for SEC play. I really want to see him complement Trevor a little bit better than he did this past Saturday. So Nate's going to be in, like I said, about that 5 to 7 range, where he'll be spotting at times in game.
Yeah, I mean, he got pulled. He got pulled from the game last week because pass protection. I mean, it's and this is a kid who we've said it since the beginning of the season. I mean, Nate Frazier's been here for half a second, right? And so it was honestly surprising, like very surprising, how many touches he got in the Clemson game, and if Trevor Etienne had been available for that Clemson game, Nate Frazier probably wouldn't have gotten as many touches as he got then either.
I agree, without a doubt. And isn't that crazy how the opportunities present themselves when somebody else is not there? So yeah, it's really weird how all that kind of came to play.
It is. All right. Next question. We're gonna go. We're gonna go. I mean, we talked a little bit about this, so we'll touch on it just real briefly from TJ Witten again. How do we slow down Milroe, either design runs or when he runs, because nothing is open? We all know what happened last December. I think I think pressure packages is one way that you do that. I also think. I do think Georgia will, and I'll let you give your thoughts too, Coach. But I think Georgia is going to do a much better job. I shouldn't say a better job. Maybe they've been doing a good job this
Yeah.
season. But I think Georgia's going to really hone in on trying to create coverage looks that confuse Jalen Milroe, and just putting him in a situation where those runs when nothing is open, where maybe he thinks we're going to be vacating the middle or playing a zone or whatever, and then we end up not doing that, and so he has it in his mind, maybe if nothing's open, he's going to take off, and we end up not doing that. But I think coverage looks, and so.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Watching what we do, I know that there's a lot of teams out there, and they love to run this, especially when they need the first down or mesh routes. And they're doing so many different variations of that now. What I noticed is Georgia played a very cool defensive scheme against mesh. It's the one where you saw Julio Humphreys come up and make that really good tackle on that guy catching the ball about, he was about 5 to 6 yards on his out route, but they needed 12 for the first down. And it's because they're running man-to-man on the inside between the hashes with all your linebackers and nickels, and then the outside guys are still playing zone. So if the mesh clears being trailed by a man-to-man on his hip, they still have a zone defender sitting there waiting on it as well to bracket. I really want to see us do a lot of bracketing, honestly, and staying in zone allows you to have eyes on your quarterback. So if he does get flushed and we're not creating that pressure in the middle of the pocket, because we know we're going to get it off the edge, which should make him essentially step up in the pocket. And if we can condense and crash the pocket, that's where we're going to see the sacks. But if he is able to squeak through, if you've got guys that are sitting in zone and have eyes on quarterback, now he's not running for a long time because they're not all in man-to-man running away from him while he's getting 10 to 15 yards until they realize it. So I really would love to see a lot more zone packages actually, and work on that bracketing to help against what Alabama wants to do, stretching the field.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this up because Randy put this in the chat. Our guy Randy from How About Them Effing Dogs cast. He said thoughts on how the secondary will play Bama's boom or bust offense. What was a question? I think he's referring to the Georgia secondary for many has come along nicely and looks to be a strength. You were just talking about that, Coach. Any more thoughts on the Georgia secondary versus Alabama? Randy says, let's see. I fully expect Georgia to play very physical with all Alabama's wide receivers, especially 17-year-old, 165-pound Ryan Williams. I think they're going to be laying hands on him early and often.
Lay hands on him, yes.
Yeah. Thoughts on the secondary and how we think they're going to line up against Alabama?
Well, to compliment Randy's question, it goes back to what I said. If we're going to be bringing those kinds of pressures, especially out of that rabbit package, you're already either in nickel or dime. So I think we're going to be in situations where sometimes, we want to bring more pressure than they can handle. If we're going to bring the 6 and 7 man, we better be ready for all man to man with zero covers, no safety help over the top. So I don't see that being something that we're going to do a lot. But when we are put in that situation, we are surely hoping trying to get home, because when you get home and you got guys running with hips and all four are covered up, then we're in good shape. But it's really going to be the difference of, can we contain when we're playing the zone versus when we do bring 6 to 7 man pressure, which we will. And can those guys, stay on hips long enough before if he does squeak out and be able to still make a throw, can we get those 50-50 balls? We've got to win more than they do to see that success we want to see in the secondary.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say too about being physical. So Randy said, furthermore, I think they have to be physical with Ryan Williams. He's fast enough to hurt them if they don't. I agree with that, Randy. What I will say is that's a lot easier said than done. Xavier Worthy was one of those guys for Texas last year. And if you watch Xavier Worthy versus Alabama, Alabama's secondary was very physical. They were trying to be physical with Xavier Worthy.
Yep.
And Xavier Worthy, caught 5 balls for 85 yards, a touchdown, a 44-yard touchdown where he blew by the Alabama secondary. I think it was Kool-Aid that he torched. But these guys like Xavier Worthy he was probably about the same size as Ryan Williams. He's a little bit more experienced, but it's a lot. It's just different because what happens is, you used to line up and you'd line up and, you'd be the boundary receiver. You'd go run out there. You'd be wide. You'd line up and the cornerback would play press coverage and he comes up on you and he puts his hands on you and does the thing. Well, now you got motions. You got people moving. It's like these offensive coordinators do a lot of things to prevent you from jamming a wide receiver, from laying hands on them, from doing stuff that will, try to prevent that. So I agree, Randy. Like, I think, I think how they played Tennessee's wide receivers is a good example. I think Tennessee might be a little bit different too, because Josh Heupel does that thing where he puts the wide receivers all the way out past the numbers, which when you have wide receivers all the way out past the numbers, they're not going to be motioning, and so you can jam them and play physical. But then what happens is, the reason we'll do a side note. The reason Tennessee's offense doesn't work against Georgia is because Georgia's secondary is fast enough and physical enough to play the run from the numbers. And so Tennessee, they spread people out to try to get that run game going. And they bet on you not having athletes fast enough and physical enough to be able to get from the numbers into the box to play the run. And Georgia just has those guys all over the field. And so Tennessee, it's a little bit different because, they're not motioning their guys a lot. They're putting them out wide and they're just betting on you're so far away from the ball that you can't play the run. So it's going to be interesting. But I think, that being said, not to belabor the point, but that being said, I think you got to do something with Ryan Williams. Like, you got to be, whether it's physical at the line of scrimmage, whether it's being physical when he catches the ball and hitting him, you got to make the kid know that you're there, because he is, he's advertised, man. He is really, really, really good. All right, Coach.
The Brodo Baggins. Do you see the Brodo Baggins question up there in the midst of all that?
I can get it. Just tell me. I'll pop over. How confident is that one? How confident are we feeling about our O-line versus Bama with Tate Ratledge out?
Good stuff.
Coach, how confident are you feeling?
I'm not too happy with our tackle play. It's obvious. You guys watch me on my film studies. As much as I try never to belittle a kid, because it gets to the point of them not being kids anymore, especially when you're a super senior at right tackle and you've had as many reps under his belt as Truss has. But our tackle play has got to improve. I don't think, believe it or not, I said at the beginning of the year, our offensive line has been one of our strengths. And honestly, taking Micah Morris and putting him in, I think we're not going to lose anything in guard play between the guards and the center. It's just a matter of finding the right match at tackle. And honestly, I think right now, Ernest Green is not playing up to his potential. Trust is obviously still making me pull my hair out. But Monroe Freeling has graded higher than any of them, even though he's had limited snaps. And I think what we're going to see through the bye week is we're going to find out who truly wants to be those two tackles. And honestly, I want to feel like Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green should be those two tackles. And but we'll just have to see if things play out. But as far as just offensive line play, like I was saying at the beginning of the show, I think it's just fundamental. It's techniques of getting better kick slides to make sure you're taking on the edge rush, making sure your assignments are sound in all pass pros when you make your calls to identify the mic and know who's got what. But it's also, a lot of those times it's not, if it's identified correctly by the front, the running back is screwing it up because he's typically part of the pass pro when you have 6-man protection. So, it comes down to the fact of answering your question. I think we're going to be okay. We're still going to be sound. We don't have really a drop off. Honestly, whether Micah's in there or Tate was in there, it's our tackle play that's got to improve. And Monroe Freeling needs to be on the field more, if not the starting left or right tackle, depending on where we go from there.
Yeah, great. All right, if you're watching the show live, go ahead and hit the like button. Leave us a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Throw a question in the chat if you have it. Thanks to Randy. Thanks to Brodo Baggins. Appreciate you guys throwing in questions. Those are really great questions and really, really awesome.
Yep.
All right, we got a couple of questions that are not necessarily related to the game, to Alabama or Kentucky. So I love these questions. So we're going to answer some of these right now. So I'm going to start with a very technical question from TJ Witten. Lucy or TNT stunts. So he's obviously watched your film breakdowns, Coach, and he says, like, you use Lucy and TNT stunts. Are those terminology that you've used throughout your coaching career? Are they widely known, or is that something that Georgia, like the Dogs, actually use?
It's my terminology. There's 100 ways to skin a cat. Everybody has their own terminology for what they do. When I'm calling Lucy, that's just a trips with a H-back connected to the tackle instead of trips open, which would be lucky. And then on the other side, if it's trips open, not connected to a tackle, that's early. And of course, if they're, to the right-hand side with somebody attached to the tackle, like an H-back or a Y, that's Ricky. So you got early and Ricky to the right side. You got Lucy and Lucky to the left side. And it's just stuff that I've used, terminology that I've come up with over the years that I've truly liked and enjoyed, because when you're out there, you want to keep the verbiage as close to par as you can without making kids overthink. That's the reason why a lot of them use the wristbands nowadays too. But if you can get the formation out to everybody on a wristband and you call play 6 and everybody knows where to line up based off what you got called, that just makes it a lot easier. So what you're hearing from me when I'm talking, it's just because of, it's like just the comforts. It's like having your comfort food, eating that nice fall weather chili that John had just a few minutes ago. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, when I'm calling stuff out, it just makes me feel more comfortable because I'm used to seeing that, because I call things as I see them. It's not something that I'm calling after the fact. So it's my terminology, not the University of Georgia's.
Yeah, got it. All right, a couple other fun questions here from our guy Evan Grimes at @fear_G on Twitter. Coach, I love this question.
Go for it, man.
If you had to choose, would you rather have an elite offensive line or an elite nasty defensive line? Which one are we going with, Coach, if we got to choose?
I'm going to be simple, since I know you really want this question. I'm going to go ahead because I'm more defensive-minded than I am offensive-minded. I want a freaking nasty front group. Defensive line is what I would love to have.
Yeah. I think for me, it's funny because I always want to lean toward an elite offensive line, because on the offensive side of the ball, an elite offensive line, can open up so many things that I feel like sometimes you can have an elite defensive line, but if your secondary is suspect or your linebackers are suspect, you know what I mean? It's like, but I'm with you, man. I think maybe this is because I've seen Georgia have good offensive lines the last few years and and at least the last 2 years needed a little bit more on the defensive line. But I think in college football, having that elite, nasty defensive line, I do think these days it takes you so far. So I'm gonna go with that too.
Sweet.
All right, Coach. This is directly to you from Evan.
Lord.
Evan Grimes at @fear_G. Hayes, as a coach, do you have a problem with all the swag accessories these kids rock? Coach, you have a problem with chains, with Trevor Etienne drawing emojis on his tape on his wrist, all the the gloves, the visors. How you feel about all that, Coach?
You may think that I'm just this old gruff, get off my lawn kind of guy, but I honestly like it for the kids. Whatever floats their boat, honestly. If that's something that's not illegal as part of the only thing that used to drive me nuts is we would go over our rules of what you could have on, what you couldn't have on for game night, and you'd always have a referee while we're warming up come over and say this kid can't be wearing this, and they'd have something goofy on like a sweatband that was up over their I don't know, there was something always stupid, and we would always have to get it would just drive me nuts because my focus was ready to start the game and we're having to deal with, clothing. So, but to tell you the truth, as long as it fits the criteria and it's not something illegal that they're not supposed to be wearing, let them have their fun with that. Let them, as long as it doesn't look Bush League and it's making the brand of what you are as a Georgia Bulldog or whatever team you're playing for, whatever you're representing with your team emblem, and it's not discarding that. You don't want to take that away. So that's the only thing that I would say. If it's taking away from the brand of what you are as a team and what your logo looks like and all that, then I'm perfectly fine with him having all that extra accessory swag.
Yeah, I dig it. I don't have any problem with it personally. I think it's good to show some personality again, as long as it doesn't distract from the overall look of the team, the continuity, etc.
Right.
I'm good for that.
Yeah.
All right, Coach. Randy has a question. 30,000-foot view. What are your impressions of Bama's 3-3-5 defense? Overall physicality, defensive line play, vulnerabilities in the back end. What do you know about Alabama's defense right now? And what are you how you feeling about that scheme?
Well, 3-3 stacks typically have a problem with back end. But when you go to a 3-3-5, that means basically you're removing both your outside backers, because originally the 3-3 stack was originated in high school to be a run defense oriented defense, because it basically put 8 in the box with a cover 3 behind it. But because a lot of teams were going vertical, and you had a lot more running gun type teams where you had 4 wide and shotgun, they had 3-3 stack teams had to adapt to that, which means you have to remove an outside backer. Well, then now if you got 4 in the backfield, you really don't have a 3-3 stack anymore. You have more of a modified 4-3 with a Sam walked up. So to tell you what they're doing, obviously, when you're in a 3-3, I don't know if you know this or not, but TCU is a 3-3 stack team. And we saw what we did against them. Of course, 2 different teams I know we're talking about here, but I think where you hit them at when you're a 3-3 stack is you try to work on taking care of the line of scrimmage and being able to move that 0 and the 2 4s, or the 0 and the 2 5s. The front 3 being moved with double teams and being able to climb up. So you're going to have to do multiple combo stuff in the run game. Realistically, if they do have 5 in secondary coverages, where you hit it is away from where those 3-3 guys are. You really work at the hashes out to the numbers on any kind of run play. Progressions can be 3 receiver route type stuff. There's all sorts of things you can do, but with a 3-3 stack team that really has just your, nickel behind it, you really want to try to hit the ball and get outside the tackle box on your play. So I would really love to see us get back into running those jets, those quick screens outside. If we're going to go passing game, we're going to definitely want to hit in the middle hook curl area, intermediate outs, things that are going to really stress those outside backers to try to get to their zone. But, like I said, from the run game, we still got to establish the line of scrimmage, and we've got to be able to move their front 3. If we can move their front 3, I think we can have some success running the football.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. All right, good stuff. Let's see here. I'm gonna look at the YouTube chat. All right, let's. I got a couple more from Twitter.
All right,
I like this one too. Let's see here.
Randy, to answer your question, I think ice cream. I think we used to always use cold stuff when we wanted to freeze the defense on a snap, like ready, set, go, and they didn't go. Anything that was cold, we would always use as a freeze count. It may not be it, but that's my best guess for you there on that.
I like it. All right, Coach. One. I'll give you one more. Okay. That is not. I don't have it teed up, but I saw it. I saw it come through. If you had to, if Georgia gets in a situation with Carson Beck, so heaven forbid, people are asking about Carson Beck's injury. Kirby Smart says not a big deal. He said we have AC sprains all over the team and people play with him and it's fine. But let's say Carson Beck ends up with an issue, has to come out of the game for a little bit, et cetera. Do you trust Gunnar Stockton to throw the ball around, or do you think Georgia's going to have to line it up and be road grading as much as they can in that situation?
That's a good question. Honestly, you're going to have to take the governor off of him eventually. I would say that they're probably going to put him out there and be more conservative with him to start with, just to make sure he's just like with anybody else. You try to get a quarterback comfortable. And what you're going to see is him doing some very simple things to start with. Probably what's nice with Gunner, with him having the ability to read, I think all of a sudden now keeping the ball off the zone would be something that you would look at doing. Putting him out on the pocket. I don't know why we don't do more rollout, honestly, where we get them out off the tackle and you set on and basically block it like stretch, where everybody steps and reaches their guy and you get the quarterback out. So if the three levels are covered, now you can tuck it and run. And that's something I think that fits Gunner's forte. So to answer your question, I think it's going to be kind of a mixture of both. It really depends on how many snaps he has to take. If it's limited snaps just for him to have to come in and replace for a little bit, I say they're going to have kind of a governor on him. But if he has to go out and take over like a Jake Fromm did for Eason back in that time, you're going to have to open up the playbook and do what you feel is good for him. And what's because like I said, it's amazing on your play sheet all of a sudden where you're at in one spot with Beck, and then all of a sudden you got your other quarterback in and you're looking at another section of your sheet, because all of a sudden these plays come into existence because of who you've got at QB.
All right, Coach. Well, that's going to be it for tonight for our show. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to jump over to a Twitter space. So if you're watching this live, if you want to come over, we'll be talking ball over there. But thanks for tuning in. If you're listening to this on podcast later, like, subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your support of the show. I'm Jon. He's Coach, and we will see y'all next time.
Go Dogs.